What's up, YouTube? It's Nemo, and I'm back with another video. And on today, we'll be doing what it seems like the whole world is doing right now, revisiting 2016, 10 years ago, what a lot of people consider to be the best year. And the topic of this year's video is Skal Labissière. We'll be going through Skal Labissière's career and essentially what went wrong with Skal Labissière. So, in the mid-2010s, NBA teams were obsessed with one idea. That was finding the perfect modern big man. Someone tall enough to protect the rim, skilled enough to space the floor, and mobile enough to survive on switches. And for a moment, Skal Labissière looked like that guy. He wasn't just highly ranked being the #1 player in the country. He was 7 foot tall with a smooth jumper, great touch around the rim, and a body that scouts thought would fill out over time. But a few years later, after being drafted, he was completely out of the NBA. So this isn't just a what happened to story. It's a case study in how hype, development, and timing can collide over time. Skal Labissière was originally born in Haiti, but he moved to the United States as a teenager, and it didn't take him long to put the basketball world on notice. He went to Lausanne Collegiate School in Tennessee and immediately became a high school superstar. He was 7 feet tall, skilled with the ball, comfortable shooting from mid-range, smooth and agile in ways a lot of big men at that time just weren't. And because of this, the recruiting sites went crazy, making Skal Labissière the #1 ranked player in the class of 2015. Not just the best big man, but the best player in general. A lot of college coaches believe he was a lot to be one and done, and NBA scouts thought he genuinely had franchise-changing potential. Even though he was the #1 player in the country, he still had one glaring weakness to his game, and that was the physical part of his game. But many scouts believe that the physical part would come later, considering the fact that he was a young guy and big men take longer to develop than guards. And they figured that you can add strength by being in the weight room and getting in the gym, but the other aspects of his game just wasn't teachable. And then Skal went to Kentucky. And the biggest adjustment for him at the collegiate level at the University of Kentucky was the physicality. A lot of the college big men weren't impressed by his skill, and they hit him early, forced him off his spots, and challenged everything. And Skal didn't respond with aggression. Instead of fighting for position, he drifted. Instead of demanding the ball, he floated around the perimeter. His rebounding numbers were really concerning. And it wasn't because he couldn't jump, but it was because he didn't want to seek out the contact. He didn't want to box out. He didn't want to get in there and bump and grind with the big man at the college level. And that was his biggest problem at Kentucky, especially playing for Coach John Calipari, who values big men who anchor the defense, rebound, and protect the rim, which Skal couldn't do. And so because Skal couldn't adjust to the college game, the physicality of the college game, it really led to a confusion in his role at Kentucky. He wasn't strong enough to be a traditional post big, but at the same time, he wasn't assertive enough and aggressive enough to be a stretch four. And typically when young players get to college and they really don't know what their role is, especially a guy that was the #1 player in the country, it kills their confidence. And you can see it in Skal Labissière's body language, making quick passes, hesitant taking shots, trying to just avoid mistakes instead of making the right play. And by the end of the season, the buzz around his name, his reputation, everything just flipped. Scouts weren't talking about his upside anymore. They were talking about how picking him would be more of a risk than a reward, which wasn't the case a year ago coming out of high school. After his freshman year at Kentucky, in which he played 36 games, starting half of them, averaging around 15 minutes a game, scoring 6.5 points a game, 3 rebounds a game, shooting 52% from the field, Skal thought it was best for his game and best for him to declare for the draft. From the outside looking in, seeing his glaring weaknesses and seeing the red flags, a lot of people believe that it was a bad decision for him to declare for the draft. But if we're being honest, for him, staying at Kentucky would have been worse. If he had another year of struggling with physicality, another year of questions rising on his ability to become an NBA player, then he would have no longer been labeled a future NBA player, a guy with a lot of great potential. But at that time, after his freshman year, NBA teams still felt like they could mold him into what they thought he was coming out of high school. And so this led to him going to the NBA draft and falling to the 28th pick, which, especially looking at his numbers and looking at how much he struggled during his time at Kentucky, wasn't bad at all. But once Skal got to the NBA, the issues became even more clear. He wasn't strong enough to really bang and defend centers, and he simply wasn't quick enough to be able to guard wings. And it ultimately made him labeled as a tweener, which is especially dangerous in the NBA if you don't have an elite skill at something, whether it's defensively or offensively. Skal could score the ball, but he didn't score efficiently or consistently. And defensively, coach couldn't trust him to execute certain schemes. This is why his minutes fluctuated much throughout his rookie season. And even when he had big games, it didn't change the way the team or the organization viewed him because of the underlying issues that were still there. As we've seen in many cases throughout the last 10 years in the NBA, NBA development is ruthless. And if you can't show improvement or potential early on, teams are willing to move on from you quickly. And we've seen it recently with Rob Dillingham. Rob Dillingham is a second-year player that the Timberwolves just got rid of like that. Now, Rob's on my team, the Bulls now. Hopefully he can make some shake. But that just shows how quick the NBA is willing to move on from a lot of these players that they consider projects. And that's what happened with Skal. And it led Skal to bounce from team to team and in and out of the G League. And the NBA as a whole just moved on to newer versions of what they believe Skal was. Stretch bigs with a little more strength, with more defensive versatility, and with more of an offensive skill set than Skal Labissière had. And once that happened, it was hard for him to be able to regain the momentum and regain the buzz that he once had to be able to get a steady roster position in the NBA. Technically speaking, Skal Labissière's story isn't a story of failure. Because if you look at his career, he's had multiple stints in the NBA. 16, 17, 17, 18, 18, 19, 19, 20, 24, 25, and he had a stint in the NBA this season. So it's technically not a story of failure. It's a story of a guy who was once viewed as being a guy with immense potential and could be a game changer in the NBA, who just didn't reach the potential that a lot of people saw in him. And it was simply because his body never caught up to his skill set. He didn't develop a defensive identity. And once getting to Kentucky and having his confidence hit early, it really seemed like he never had the opportunity to really bounce back and get the confidence that he once had. Now, Skal Labissière's story isn't a unique story. We've seen several cases of something similar, but it's one of the more extreme stories, and it shows how the gap between high school basketball and the NBA can really swallow players alive. It also shows how rankings can sometimes reward what looks good instead of what translates to the next level. For a brief moment, In 2015 and 2016, Skal Labissière represented what the future of the NBA was going to be. The problem was the future moved faster than he could. And in conclusion, that's just what went wrong with former #1 recruit Skal Labissière. If you liked the video, make sure you hit the like button, you subscribe, and you share the video with your friends. And until next time, I'm out.